handful with only a 98-inch wheelbase. Again, AMC power this time around, but without the use of a supercharger, as Perry Hicks lines up for his shot at 2.44 seconds, the mark to beat from the supercharged Shake Me of Tom Mintz. The green flag comes out, Hicks lines up, and a very, very good starting line launch is ruined with a very, very, very sick-sounding motor. Hicks will stay in the throttle, but there's no use at this point as the machine was gaining no forward momentum. The USHRA Association ground crew will go out and take a measurement, and that will indeed put Hicks in the final standings. A tough break for the local racer who was looking to do good in front of a packed house here at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena. But right now, nowhere near that 2-second mark that he needed to take over the #1 spot. You can tell just by looking at the machine that one of the biggest problems with the vehicle as it gets bogged down is the extra weight of the mud. Even though Hicks only went 25 feet 2 inches through this 100-foot-long pit, you can see the mud accumulating on the vehicle, especially when he puts up rooster tails of mud like that, will actually weigh the thing down. In fact, it's not unusual for these guys to pick up anywhere from 300 to 600 extra pounds just from the mud sticking to the mud racer. Hicks stays in the throttle as long as he dares, but with no more forward momentum, he knows that the battle is over and shuts it down. So Tom Mintz still leads the field at 2.44 seconds, but we still have some killers coming up, including defending USHRA Association Super Modified champion Tom Martin in the incredible Mud Patrol. Right now, however, what should prove to be one of the quickest and fastest entries in this battle, the incredible Heart Attack Super Modified Mud Racer of Tim Hall. A fuel-injected, nitrous oxide-injected, alcohol-burning machine that is capable of low 2-second runs. And you'll notice Hall has taken a line a little bit different down this mud pit from some of the other racers, a little bit over to the right-hand side of this mud bog, trying to stay out of the ruts that are forming from previous competitors' tires. Bringing the RPMs up, the flagman throws the green. Hall checks out the surface and runs into a little problem. Now gets back in the throttle, but he was too far over the starting line, and one of the strongest machines in this competition has blown a chance at the #1 spot simply by overstaging. You could see Hall trying to find a place to go down through this pit where the ruts weren't too deep, but the machine crept forward over the starting line. At that point, he tried to nail the throttle, but the front end was already buried to the hubs, and Hall had no choice but to watch the machine sink 3 feet into this mud bog. An 18-foot shot will put him dead last in the standings, and one of the toughest possible opponents is sent to the showers without even giving it a decent shot. The next machine fired up and pulling up should also prove to be a serious competitor shooting for the #1 spot. Texas's own Bubba Clements. The chances are fiberglass-bodied Jeep funny car with a supercharged fuel-injected Chevy motor is always one of the quickest and fastest in USHRA Association competition. 2.44 seconds, the mark to beat. Clements brings the idle up, leaves the starting line beautifully, and he's got a great run going. Locking up the brakes, he slides out of bounds, and he knows it. By literally only 5 or 6 feet, he passes the mandatory stopping mark, and indeed will be thrown out even after a successful 2.5-second run that easily could have threatened Tom Mintz for the lead. And you can see Clements, he is not happy. Indeed, the stopping area getting so sloppy at this point that it's taking a true braking master just to get these things stopped after a 65-mile-an-hour blast through 100 feet of mud. And Clements knows that he had a shot, but now it doesn't matter. Look at the starting line leave as again 2,000 horsepower kicks in. The front end violently comes up out of the pit, but he stays in the throttle a full car length past the finish line marker, and that was the distance that he needed to stop this thing in time for the elapsed time to count. What a break for Bubba Clements. Now, you want a supercharged lightweight mud racer? Take a look at Ken Crum's brand new No Respect. The man who brought us the supercharged Subaru Brat has now built this incredible rear-engine dragster. The power plant, a 354 cubic inch DeSoto Hemi. Only the oldest of old-timers out there will remember the ever-popular DeSoto that produced some of the earliest model Hemi-type engines in the mid-1950s. This 1,600-pound machine is one of the lightest ever created for USHRA Association events, and on this maiden voyage, we'll get a chance to see whether Ken Crum's unique chassis philosophy of this vehicle will work or fail. bringing the RPM up. He leaves the starting line beautifully and shuts it down as it heads for the outer boundary. I think Crum was more concerned with the fact that he had no steering control with the front end that high in the air, and now shuts it down, again disgusted. It seems that more mud racing competitors at this particular event have been foiled by their inability to judge the track and their car's performance than anything else. You can see Crum stops this machine just inches in front of the finish line, but the Kansas City, Kansas veteran has got to be upset after that shot. He knew he had the perfect starting line launch going, but then when the machine had the front end up that high, there was no way to control it. You can see the car with the front end way up out of the pit. Crum trying to steer it away from the outer boundary, but as the tires just missed going out of bounds to the left side of the berm, he got out of the throttle and shut it down, staring at the finish line marker where he should have been going under full power. A tough break for the youngster from Kansas City, but we've still got some of the best coming, included heavily used by some of the previous starters. Let's see if he can get off this starting line with a minimum of wheel spin. We know that this racer has enough power to keep the front end up and storm it through the top end. The starting line crew now ready to stage Tom Martin up. He adjusts the belts inside the cockpit. Got to remember, this guy is the largest mud racing pilot out there at an honest 6'6" tall, almost 300 pounds. Martin inches forward, lines it up. The all-important groundhog tires will keep an eye on these to see just how bad his starting line spin is. Waiting for the green flag. The 1,600 horsepower nitrous Terra leaves the line beautifully. And Martin with the front end up also heads for the outer boundary on an extremely slippery surface. For the 5th time in this event, a driver is forced to get out of the throttle when the machine heads for the outer boundary that marks each side of this 100-foot long pit. Martin gives a thumbs up to the fans, but knows that he has wasted a shot at the #1 spot. But look at the elapsed time nonetheless. 2.53 seconds. You can see him out of the throttle and on his 30 feet before the finish line. He stops well within bounds, but without being able to get through this pit under full throttle. Tom Martin, by 9/100ths of a second, will fall to the #2 position. What a heartbreaking effort for the man who won the 1988 U.S. Hot Rod Association World Points Championship. If only he'd been able to stay in the throttle all the way through. Rich Whitfield and his Wildfire, a small block supercharged Chevrolet Jeep funny car, one of the more unusual entries in this category, as opposed to the mega cubic inch combinations about a 350 cubic inch small block. He leaves the starting line beautifully, but the machine heads for the berm again, and he is forced to get out of the throttle. It appears that the ruts that are forming in this track are automatically sending the vehicles over to the right-hand side boundary. That would automatically disqualify them if they went over to the side of the pit. You can see Whitfield exceptionally happy with his ability to keep straight as he throws a wave to the crowd. Watching on the replay, you can see one of the best launches yet. The machine only keeps the front end dug in for a split second. But then when the nose comes up out of the pit from the horsepower, it heads for the outer boundary. He shuts it down just before the finish line. And at 2.98 seconds, Whitfield also had a decent shot at the #1 spot before he was forced to feather that throttle. A tough break for one of the more unusual competitors in U.S. Hot Rod Association Super Modified Racing. But now it's the defending champion and certainly the hometown favorite here in Oklahoma City, the one and only Larry Jarrett, the Locomotion Supercharged Super Modified.